The Stranger at Dawn. Thunder rolled across the pre-dawn sky as Rachel Thorne wiped down the counter of her diner for the 100th time. The neon "open" sign flickered against the storm-darkened windows of Thorne's corner, casting alternating shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Located on the outskirts of Millbrook, her establishment was often the first stop for travelers coming down from the mountain pass, though few ventured out in weather like this. The bell above the door chimed, bringing with it a gust of wind and rain. Rachel looked up, her practiced welcome dying on her lips as she took in the figure standing in the doorway. The stranger was tall, wrapped in a sodden gray cloak that obscured their features entirely. Water pooled beneath their feet as they stood motionless, seeming to survey the empty diner. "Come in before you catch your death," Rachel called out, reaching for a fresh mug. "Coffee's hot, and I've got fresh pie just out of the oven." The figure moved with an odd grace, gliding more than walking to the counter. Close up, Rachel could see delicate hands emerging from the cloak's sleeves, the skin an unusual pale blue that she attributed to the cold. "You are kind to offer," the stranger spoke, their voice carrying a musical lilt that Rachel couldn't quite place. "I have no currency you would recognize." Rachel pushed the steaming mug of coffee forward. "First cups on the house. You look like you could use it." She turned to slice a piece of apple pie, pretending not to notice how the stranger's hands trembled as they reached for the mug, or how they seemed to study it as if they'd never seen coffee before. "This establishment," the stranger began, "it belongs to you." "Going on 15 years now," Rachel replied, sliding the pie across the counter. "Inherited it from my father, who got it from his father. Been in the family since before I was born." The stranger's hood tilted slightly. "Family. Legacy. These things matter to your kind." Rachel's hands stilled on the counter. Something about the way they said "your kind" sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the storm outside. Before she could respond, headlights swept across the windows as a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The stranger stiffened, their hands withdrawing beneath the cloak. "They followed me," they whispered, fear evident in their melodic voice. "I thought I had more time." Rachel glanced between the mysterious figure and the approaching vehicle. In 15 years of running the diner, she'd developed a good sense for trouble, and everything about this situation set off warning bells. Making the split-second decision, she lifted the counter's hinged section. "Kitchen. Back door leads to the alley. Go." The stranger hesitated. "Why would you help me?" "Because someone helped my grandmother when she came to this country with nothing but hope and a dream. Sometimes kindness is the only currency that matters." Rachel gestured urgently toward the kitchen as car doors slammed outside. "Go, I'll stall them." As the kitchen door swung shut behind the cloaked figure, Rachel returned to wiping the counter, her heart pounding. The bell chimed again as 3 men in dark suits entered, their shoes squeaking on the wet floor. The leader, a stern-faced man with graying temples, approached the counter. "Evening, ma'am. Federal agents. We're pursuing a person of interest who may have passed through here." Rachel met his gaze steadily, channeling every ounce of her father's poker face. "Haven't seen many folks tonight. Storm's keeping people home." She gestured to the empty diner. "Coffee while you look around." The agent's eyes narrowed, scanning the room before fixing on the single-used coffee mug on the counter. Rachel's pulse quickened, but she maintained her calm demeanor. "Just finished my break," she explained, picking up the mug and turning to the sink. "You boys are welcome to check the place out, but I'd appreciate if you'd wipe your feet." "Just mopped." As the agents spread out to search the diner, Rachel said a silent prayer that her mysterious guest had made it far enough away. She didn't understand what was happening, but her gut told her she'd made the right choice. The stranger's words echoed in her mind. "Your kind." Perhaps there was more to this stormy night than she realized. When the agents finally left empty-handed, Rachel locked the door behind them and flipped the sign to "closed." The pie still sat untouched on the counter, a silent witness to the evening's strange events. As she wrapped it up, Her fingers brushed against something tucked under the plate, a small crystalline object that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Rachel held it up to the flickering neon, watching colors dance across its surface. Whatever she'd gotten herself involved in, she had a feeling her life would never be quite the same. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but somewhere in the darkness, a stranger was safe because of a simple act of kindness, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. Echoes of the stars. Rachel spent the next 3 days jumping at shadows. Every black vehicle that passed the diner made her pulse quicken, and every unfamiliar face had her studying their features for signs of something otherworldly. The crystal lay hidden in an old cookie tin beneath her bed, though sometimes at night she could swear she heard it humming. The morning crowd had just cleared out when she noticed the strange interference on her ancient television mounted in the corner. The weather report dissolved into static, then cleared to reveal a familiar musical voice emanating from the speakers. "Rachel Thorne, I need your help." She nearly dropped the coffee pot she was holding. Glancing around the empty diner, she approached the TV. The screen showed only snow, but the voice continued. "The crystal I left you. It's a communicator. And a warning." Rachel retrieved the crystal from her apartment above the diner, her hands trembling slightly as she unwrapped it. In the daylight, its pulsing seemed more urgent, its colors shifting like oil on water. "I am Lyra," the voice continued through the TV. "My people are called the Luminari. We have watched your planet for centuries, hidden in plain sight as your species took its first steps into the cosmos." "Those men who came looking for you," Rachel whispered, "they weren't really federal agents, were they?" "Some were, some were not. There are those among both our peoples who wish to prevent what is coming." The crystal's pulsing synchronized with Lyra's words. "A convergence approaches. Earth will soon be invited to join the Galactic Alliance, but there are factions who believe your species is too volatile, too unpredictable." Rachel sank into a booth, her mind reeling. "Why tell me this? I'm just a diner owner." "Because you showed kindness without expectation of reward. Because you trusted your instincts over authority. These are qualities my people once valued, before fear began to rule our decisions." The crystal's light dimmed slightly. "And because you are not the only one who inherited more than just a building from your family." Before Rachel could process that cryptic statement, the diner's door chimed. A man entered, tall, distinguished, with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. He moved with the same fluid grace as Lyra had. "I am Talon," he announced, his voice carrying that same musical quality. "Lyra's mentor, and, until recently, a member of the Luminary High Council." He slid into the booth across from Rachel. "We don't have much time. Those who hunt us have detected our communication." Rachel clutched the crystal tighter. "What did Lyra mean about my family?" Talon's expression softened. "Your grandmother didn't just come to this country with hope and dreams, Rachel. She came with a secret. The Luminary have had guardians among humanity for generations, families who know the truth and help maintain the balance. Your grandmother was one of them." The sound of tires on gravel outside made them both tense. Through the windows, Rachel could see 3 black SUVs approaching. But these were different from before. Their surfaces seemed to ripple and shift, as if they weren't quite solid. "They're here," Talon said grimly. "The shadows. They serve those who would rather destroy Earth than risk its inclusion in the Alliance." He fixed Rachel with an intense gaze. "You have a choice to make, child of guardians. The crystal you hold contains proof of a conspiracy that reaches across galaxies. It could ensure Earth's acceptance into the Alliance, or doom it, depending on whose hands it falls into." Rachel thought of her grandmother, who had always told her to trust her heart above all else, who had taught her that kindness was never wasted, even if its purpose wasn't immediately clear. The crystal pulsed warmly in her hands, almost like a heartbeat. "What do you need me to do?" Talon smiled, and for a moment, his human disguise flickered, revealing iridescent skin and eyes like distant stars. "First, we run. Then we find Lyra. And then, he glanced at the approaching vehicles. We show both our peoples that humanity's unpredictability might be exactly what the galaxy needs. Rachel grabbed her jacket and the crystal, pausing only to scribble a closed for family emergency sign for the diner's door. As she followed Talon toward her back exit, she couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. Her grandmother had always said life's greatest adventures often started with a simple act of kindness. She just hadn't mentioned those adventures might involve alien conspiracies and the fate of the planet. The crystal hummed in her pocket, and somewhere in the vast darkness of space, ancient powers stirred. The game was about to change, and a small-town diner owner held the key to it all. The pursuit begins. The back roads of Millbrook had never seen anything like it. Rachel's ancient pickup truck roared through the mountain passes, pursued by vehicles that occasionally phased through solid objects. In the passenger seat, Talon manipulated the crystal with precise movements, its light casting ethereal patterns across the dashboard. "Take the next right," he instructed, his voice tight with urgency. "There's an old mining tunnel that will shield us from their sensors." Rachel yanked the wheel, tires spraying gravel. "You know, when I woke up this morning, my biggest concern was ordering more coffee filters." A black SUV materialized through a hillside behind them. "Now I'm running from quantum cars with an alien diplomat." My grandmother could have mentioned this possibility during all those life lessons. "Your grandmother was protecting you," Talon replied, his human disguise flickering as he concentrated on the crystal. The fewer who knew about the Guardian families, the safer everyone was. But now, he paused as the crystal pulsed rapidly. "They're not just trying to stop Earth from joining the Alliance anymore. They're afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of what you represent. Human and Guardian blood combined, carrying the genetic legacy that could bridge our peoples. The Shadows fear such combinations. They believe purity is strength." The tunnel entrance loomed ahead, a dark maw in the mountainside. Rachel killed the headlights and plunged in, muscle memory from teenage adventures guiding her through the darkness. The pursuing vehicle's lights created strange shadows that danced along the tunnel walls. Lyra discovered their true plan, Talon continued. "The Shadows don't just want to prevent Earth's admission to the Alliance. They want to use humanity as an example, to show what happens to species that embrace diversity instead of purity." The crystal suddenly flared brilliant blue, filling the tunnel with light. Rachel slammed the brakes as a figure materialized in front of them. Lyra, no longer cloaked, her true form radiant with bioluminescent patterns. "We must hurry," Lyra announced, sliding into the back seat. "The Shadows have activated the harvester." Talon's disguise dropped completely, revealing his crystalline skin and starlit eyes. "So soon? They risk exposing themselves to Earth's authorities." "They're desperate," Lyra replied. "Rachel's existence proves what they've denied for centuries, that our peoples can coexist, even blend. If Earth joins the Alliance with a Guardian-human hybrid leading the way." "I'm sorry," Rachel interrupted, "but what exactly is a harvester?" The tunnel exit approached, revealing a valley bathed in unnatural green light. Above them, a massive shape blotted out the stars, a ship that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. As they watched, beams of energy began to reach down toward Millbrook. "The harvester collects genetic material," Lyra explained grimly. "It will extract DNA from every human in its range, analyzing it for signs of Guardian inheritance. Any it finds," she trailed off, "they'll use it as evidence that humanity is already contaminated," Talon finished. "Justification for quarantining Earth permanently." Rachel thought of her diner, of the regulars who were like family, of the travelers who found refuge there. All those lives, all those stories, reduced to genetic samples in an alien database. "Not happening," she declared, stepping on the gas. "My grandmother didn't protect this secret for generations, just to have some cosmic purists ruin everything. The crystal contains proof of their conspiracy, right? We just need to get it to someone who can expose them." The Alliance Council, Lyra said. But their nearest outpost is hundreds of miles away, and the Harvester will complete its work within hours. Rachel smiled, a plan forming. You know what the problem is with beings who believe in purity. They underestimate the power of mixing things up. She turned to Talon. That crystal can communicate with any electronic device, right? And Lyra, you said the Harvester analyzes genetic material. Both aliens stared at her with growing understanding. What are you suggesting? Talon asked. My diner satellite dish might not look like much, but I had it modified to pick up sports channels I'm not technically supposed to get. If we can boost its signal with the crystal, broadcast the proof of their conspiracy directly to every TV and radio in the county. She grinned. Let's give them so much genetic material to analyze that their precious Harvester chokes on it. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with excitement. The chaos of overwhelming data, combined with exposure of their presence, Talon continued. They'll have to retreat or risk full disclosure to Earth's population. Rachel finished. And nothing ruins a secret conspiracy like going viral on social media. The Harvester's beams intensified, reaching for their vehicle. Rachel pressed the accelerator to the floor, her grandmother's words echoing in her mind. Sometimes the best way to fight darkness is to scatter so much light that it has nowhere to hide. Above them, the Harvester loomed like a dark promise. But in Rachel's truck, three beings from different worlds shared a moment of understanding. Sometimes the greatest power came not from purity, but from the beautiful chaos of combination. And they were about to prove it. Hidden truths. The neon sign of Thorne's Corner Diner buzzed in the eerie green light of the Harvester. Rachel yanked open the back door, her key ring jangling as her hands shook with adrenaline. Behind her, Lyra and Talon moved in perfect synchronization, their crystalline forms shimmering as they carried equipment from the truck. The satellite dish is on the roof, Rachel said, leading them through the dark kitchen. Dad installed it himself. Said if we were going to break the rules, might as well do it properly. She paused at a shelf lined with old photos. He knew, didn't he, about all of this? Talon nodded, his starlit eyes reflecting off the chrome surfaces. Your father was a guardian, like his mother before him. He chose to step back from active duty when you were born, to give you a chance at a normal life. The building shuddered as another beam from the Harvester swept past. Through the windows, Rachel could see people in the streets, staring up at the sky in confusion and fear. The massive ship had dropped its cloaking, no longer caring about secrecy in its desperate mission. They're starting a wider scan, Lyra reported, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. We don't have much time. Rachel led them up the narrow stairs to the roof access. The satellite dish stood like a sentinel against the night sky, its metal surface reflecting the ominous green glow. As Talon began modifying the dish with tools that seemed to materialize from his crystalline form, Rachel turned to Lyra. You said the crystal contains proof of their conspiracy. What exactly are we broadcasting? Lyra held up the crystal, its colors now swirling with intense purpose. Records of shadow operations across multiple worlds. Evidence of genetic manipulation. Suppressed research showing the benefits of genetic diversity. And, she hesitated, the truth about the Guardian program. Which is, it wasn't just about hiding among humans, Talon answered without looking up from his work. It was an experiment in cooperation. Proof that our peoples could work together, even blend, creating something stronger than the sum of its parts. Your grandmother wasn't just a guardian. She was one of the first successful human luminary hybrids. Rachel steadied herself against the roof's edge as the implications hit her. So when you said I had guardian blood, you are living proof of what the shadows fear most. Lyra confirmed, a perfect fusion of human adaptability and luminary consciousness, the genetic bridge that could unite our peoples. A high-pitched whine filled the air as Talon connected the crystal to the modified satellite dish. Ready, he announced. But Rachel, you should know. Broadcasting this truth will change everything. Your life, your world. The world's already changing. Rachel interrupted, watching as more beams from the harvester began systematically sweeping through Millbrook. At least this way we choose how. She reached for the crystal, and as her fingers touched its surface, it blazed with brilliant light. Suddenly, every screen in town, phones, TVs, tablets, even the digital billboard by the highway, flickered to life. The crystal's data poured out in a torrent of images and information. Shadow ships harvesting genetic material from unsuspecting worlds, secret meetings of purist leaders, and records of the Guardian program's successes. But more than data flowed through Rachel's connection with the crystal. She saw her grandmother's memories, a young woman discovering her hybrid nature, choosing to use her unique perspective to bridge two worlds. She felt her father's love, his decision to step back not from fear, but from hope that his daughter would choose her own path. The harvester's beams intensified, now targeting the diner directly. Rachel could feel its systems attempting to analyze the flood of genetic data, trying to separate pure from mixed, failing to comprehend the beautiful complexity of human luminary DNA. "It's working," Lyra exclaimed as the massive ship's scanning patterns became erratic. Their systems can't process this much genetic diversity. But victory came with a price. The shadow ships that had been pursuing them earlier materialized around the diner, their forms fully visible now. Dark figures emerge, their bodies seeming to absorb light itself. "You risk everything," a voice boomed, somehow reaching them despite the chaos. Generations of careful separation, of preserved purity, all for what? A species that can barely reach its own moon. Rachel stood tall, feeling the combined strength of her human and luminary heritage flowing through her. The crystal pulsed in harmony with her dual nature, its broadcast growing stronger. "That's exactly why humanity deserves a chance," she called out. "We're messy and complicated and nowhere near pure, but we keep reaching anyway. And sometimes," she glanced at Talon and Lyra, thinking of all the lives connected by a simple diner at the edge of town. "Sometimes reaching across differences creates something more beautiful than purity ever could." The harvester's beams began to flicker as its systems overloaded. Above them, the battle for Earth's future hung in the balance, while below, the truth continued to spread, one screen at a time. A choice of trust. The shadow forces converged on the diner's roof as the harvester's systems struggled against the flood of genetic data. Rachel stood her ground, the crystal blazing in her hands, its light mixing with her grandmother's locket, a family heirloom that she now realized was much more than just jewelry. "You cannot stop what is coming," the shadow leader declared, its form rippling like oil on water. "Even now, our allies in the Alliance Council moved to quarantine this sector. Earth will be isolated, preserved as an example of what happens when purity is compromised." "I wouldn't be so sure about that," Lyra said, her bioluminescent patterns forming complex sequences. "Look up." Through gaps in the harvester's overwhelming presence, new lights appeared in the sky. Ships of different designs and origins, their forms reflecting the diversity of the Alliance itself. Leading them was a vessel that shone like captured starlight, the Luminary High Council. "Did you really think," Talon addressed the shadows, "that we would launch this revelation without ensuring the right witnesses were present?" The crystal's broadcast had reached beyond Earth now, carried by the modified satellite dish into space itself. On screens across the planet and beyond, the truth continued to spread. The Shadows' conspiracy, the success of the Guardian program, and the undeniable evidence that diversity bred strength. "Your quarantine has failed," Rachel declared, feeling the combined power of her heritage flowing through her. "Earth isn't isolated anymore. We're connected to the Alliance, to the Luminary, to every species that believes in reaching across differences instead of hiding behind walls of purity." The shadow leader moved forward, its darkness intensifying. "Then we will do what we have always done. We will destroy what we cannot control." It raised a hand, darkness gathering like a weapon. Rachel felt no fear. She thought of her diner, of 15 years serving coffee and pie to travelers from all walks of life. of conversations shared across differences, of connections made over simple meals, of her grandmother's courage and her father's love, of the strength that came from being both human and luminary, not despite their differences, but because of them. The crystal responded to her conviction, its light expanding in a wave that pushed back the darkness. Where light met shadow, new colors formed, proof that even opposites could create something beautiful in their meeting. Enough. A new voice rang out as a figure of pure light descended from the luminary vessel. The High Counselor herself, her form a symphony of crystalline patterns. The evidence is irrefutable. The Shadow Protocol is hereby dissolved, its adherents to be held accountable for crimes against multiple species. The shadow forces wavered, their forms becoming less distinct. Above them, the Harvester's lights flickered and died, its systems finally overwhelmed by the complexity it had tried to categorize and control. Earth will be offered full Alliance membership, the High Counselor continued, with the Guardian program serving as a blueprint for future cooperation between species. She turned to Rachel. If you are willing to help guide this transition. Rachel looked at her diner below, at the town she'd grown up in, at the sky that suddenly seemed so much bigger and brighter. On one condition, she said, the diner stays open. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens over a hot cup of coffee and a slice of pie. The High Counselor's light sparkled in what might have been a smile. Agreed. Dawn broke over Millbrook, painting the sky in colors that seemed more vibrant than ever before. The shadow ships retreated, their dark forms escorted by Alliance vessels. The Harvester, its mission failed, dissolved into particles of light that rained down like gentle starfall. 1 week later, Thorne's Corner Diner reopened with a slightly modified menu that included both human comfort food and luminary delicacies. Rachel stood behind the counter, wearing her grandmother's locket proudly, serving customers from Earth and beyond. The crystal sat in a place of honor near the register, its light a gentle reminder of the power of reaching across differences. Sometimes late at night, when the diner was quiet, Rachel would look up at the stars and smile, knowing that somewhere up there, countless worlds were discovering what her little diner had always known, that the best traditions were the ones that welcomed everyone to the table. And if sometimes her coffee cups floated gently to their destinations, or her regular customers noticed she hadn't aged quite normally, well, that was just part of the charm of the most unique diner in the galaxy, where a simple act of kindness had changed everything.